Hello and welcome to Big Picture Walks. It's been a while. I'm sorry for not being able to put on some new films throughout a few weeks already, maybe something like 2 months. But I'm back. Today I'm going to talk about an important policy challenge for the digital era, namely the value of data. So think about two questions. First, why is it that you have access to such brilliant digital technologies as the ones provided by Google, Facebook, that was created against certain costs, but yet you don't pay for it? The other question I'm going to ask is, why is it the case that despite the tremendous developments, GDP growth at the global scale has apparently slowed down? So if you look at growth rates at a longer time perspective, you'd probably see that, if anything, there has been a deceleration, not an acceleration in the pace of GDP growth, despite tremendous acceleration in the rate of growth in terms of information processing. This is what is sometimes called the modern productivity paradox. Robert Solow in 1987 said, "You can see the computer age everywhere but in productivity statistics." Now, that's no longer true, because now you see ICTs, information communication technologies, in productivity statistics. There's been a lot of work done on this, and we can say this for sure. But on the other hand, the newer technologies related to the internet, to artificial intelligence and so on, they are not really seen in productivity statistics. And why is it the case? Okay, maybe these two questions are actually related. Maybe it is the case that the excellent services of Google, etc., provide increases in the productivity of nations, but this is not properly measured. So one of the ideas is the mismeasurement hypothesis. It could be the case. But I would like to talk about something broader, the value of data. Because it's not like you don't pay for your services on the internet. You do pay, just not with your money. You pay with your data. Costs of producing these fantastic digital technologies are covered by the firms who place ads. Thanks to the data that you provide, they can place the ads much better and get a much higher return on their advertising costs. So what I believe is the bottom line of this discussion is that the digital era, the new digital technologies increase growth, increase the scope of our overall control over the world way beyond the pecuniary value of those services. So it may well be the case that companies like Google or Facebook, in fact, have way more control over the world that it would follow from their balance sheets, okay, from the information on the revenue they make and so on. Because apart from the money they earn, they also get the control over these data. So we are willingly expropriated from this data, which we don't feel as expropriation because data is non-rivalrous. Non-rivalry of ideas means that when we give someone our data, we share it, but we retain it for ourselves as well. Right? So there is no loss in data once we allow someone to copy it. So this is an important distinction between data and information more generally than goods, products. Right? We don't know how fast the extent of our control grows, but we can probably see that it's faster than growth in GDP. Just to give you a rough point of reference, it's that global GDP doubles every 20 to 30 years these days. On the other hand, the amount of data either stored or communicated or processed is doubled every 2 to 3 years. So it's an order of magnitude faster growth rate. So the major challenge we are facing in the digital era is to calculate the flows of useful data. Ideally, it will be great if we could create something similar to what we have for value added, namely a system of national accounts but for data. And not at the national scale, but at the global scale, because, as we all know, data flows don't really respect national boundaries. And the internet is global. So we would need something like global data accounts to be able to compute how much data is communicated, how much data is copied, how much data is stored, and how much data is used up in the production of probably more valuable information, or maybe goods as well. What the studies done so far have already accomplished is to measure the indirect effects of the information boom on productivity, because indirectly, of course, our ability to better process and communicate information can help us in producing more efficiently and being more productive, allocating our resources better at the global scale. So this is clearly an advantage, but it's an indirect advantage of the digital revolution, and we're interested also in the direct effects. Note that this is technologically feasible now. So as opposed to previous eras, previous centuries, when data communication was basically among people by talking or by sending letters, these days, like virtually all the communication leaves digital traces that can be quantified. So in principle, this is technologically feasible to do. It has a lot of questions, and of course I don't know the answer to those questions. If I knew them, I would publish papers about that, but I don't. But I think it's an important challenge for the digital era to devise such sort of statistical device, to have something analogous to national accounts, which measures GDP and value added and intermediate input use and so on in terms of dollar value. We would need to have something similar for data measured in, let's say, optimally compressed bytes. As a side effect, it could also help quantify our technological progress, because to a large extent, I believe, progress is about accumulating useful information. And so maybe we could identify among all the sorts of information also the part of it which is responsible for technological progress. Now, there is, of course, plenty of issues with that. I mean, it's obvious that there is plenty of issues. First of all, not all data are useful data. There is a lot of redundancy. There is a lot of duplication, and frankly, some data are even harmful, not just useless, but even worse. Right? You can think about computer viruses. You can think about fake news, about smear campaigns, or all sorts of digital pollution. Another caveat is that, of course, data don't respect national boundaries. So as I already argued, it would need to be a global measure. And of course, there is another point, which is intellectual property and data secrecy. So measurement of data flows and data volume in terms of processing or storage is problematic, especially if you would take into account that one could peek into the content of this data. But I believe, clever programmers and IT specialists would probably one day think a way how to go around this and respect intellectual property, and at the same time being able to quantify the quantity, okay? Not the exact content, but the quantity of the data that is being processed and communicated. So the rough estimates that we have is that, okay, and I quote, general purpose computing capacity grew at an annual rate of 58%. The world's capacity for bidirectional telecommunication grew at 28% per year, closely followed by the increase in globally stored information, 23% per year. That's Hilbert and Lopez, 2011. Another quote I would like to give is by Gillings, Hilbert, and Kemp, 2016. Less than 1% of information was in digital form in the mid-1980s, growing to more than 99% today. This means that we have basically digitalized all the information we had before the digital era, and added much more information because, as I said, data doubles every 2 to 3 years. A majority of data that exists was created in the last 3 years, which is a surprising statistic. More generally, compared to previous eras in the human history, comparing to the industrial era and even further back, the special characteristic of the digital era is that it has decoupled the information processing capacity from the capacity of human brains. If I were asked about my own personal guess, about my personal opinion, I believe that the data that we have is like strongly undervalued, especially as technologies go ahead and newer artificial intelligence algorithms could visibly improve the value added created of every byte of data. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Thank you very much. Bye.